Well, good afternoon. Boy, I don't like, well, you're welcome to my video chat. Excuse me for being so rude. I don't like rubbing people's nose in it. And I just spoke to Ireland, to my sister, Vanessa, just now, and she was telling me the weather's lovely there. Well, that's good. It is 24 degrees here now, and I must say it's warm, little breeze. I put the sunshades down simply because I'd be sweating, as they say. Anyway, you're very welcome. I'm delighted you joined me. Before I tell my little story today, and it's about fathers. It's about fathers. But first of all, let me tell you a mishap, a little mishap. I'm not a car man. I've never been a car man. I've always had nice cars. I think it sort of goes with the job. But I remember the first Mercedes I ever bought, the first Mercedes. And before that, I had Jaguar and BMW. But the first Mercedes I bought here in Bennett in Marbella, not that that means anything to you people in Dublin or London or wherever. Bennett is the main, I think it's the main Mercedes dealer here. And it was an E 320 or something. I told you I'm not a car man. Anyway, so they call up and say your car is ready, or the number plates or whatever. They're all on and everything's ready for you. And I get into my car. Honestly, it's a dark blue, sort of metallic blue if you want, car. Absolutely beautiful. Unfortunately, it was raining heavily. Anyway, you can't do anything about that. So I decided to drive to my offices. Now, at that time, I had High Magazine, which is a bit like, I've told the story many times, I'm going to tell now, but it's a bit like OK Magazine, Hola, Hello Magazine. It was called High Magazine. And I thought I'd bring my new car to my office just to show everybody my new car. Yes, you're right, showing off. So I pull up, it's lashing rain. Where I parked, there's a new building gone up. So it's all bricked up, the new building. And I could park there and then I go up to my offices. Anyway, I parked the car like a good man, went up and I told the staff, do you want to come down and see my new car? And they all said they'd love to. Probably thinking to themselves, who gives a about his new car? But he is the boss. So when I say all the staff, there was probably six in total. Probably six in total. Oh, here we go. That's like a Ferrari or a Lamborghini. Yeah, going by. Anyway, not my car, Mercedes. So we went down. It was lashing rain. I'm sure the staff didn't even want to go down. And there was my car. No, it wasn't gleaming in the rain. It was smashed to bits. When I mean to bits, I mean to bits. What had happened is one of the walls in this new building, which was all bricked up, I'm laughing now, I was crying, fell down on my car and smashed in the roof, smashed in the bonnet. The whole thing was smashed. There was bricks inside the car. And the staff thought that it was a joke. They didn't think it was my car. They just thought, come on down, look at my new car. And there it is, in bits. Anyway, that's what happened to that car. And believe it or not, the insurance company wouldn't give me a new car. They told me it's just the skin. Seemingly Mercedes is built like a house, I think. And anyway, but it did make the local papers here, the photograph of the car. In fact, I didn't send it. I think one of the staff took the photograph and sent it. But could you imagine how devastated you must feel to have your first new Mercedes? And there it was a total write-off, I thought, but it wasn't a write-off. But when I got it back from Mercedes, I swear to you, it was as good as new. I never had an ounce of trouble from it that I can remember. That's my little story about that. Now, fathers. What was your father like? I was thinking, we were having a coffee today, and we were talking fathers. And I'll tell you the story about my father. My father, in those days, they all got married very young, my mother and my father. So my father was quite young when I was born. I'm the eldest of four children. That's two boys and two girls. And my father, being the eldest, I think it's natural, is it, that I was the spoilt one, if you want. But he used to, the memory I remember most of my father, the furthest back memory, was going with him on a Sunday when he used to do house calls. doctor in those days used to, believe it or not, they used to do house calls, and he used to love taking me with him. And the funny thing is, he drove a Jaguar in Dublin, which was quite unusual. There wasn't that many. And my father's practice was a working class to poorer practice, with high rises. And you wouldn't bring a Jaguar into that area, really. You might only come back with a wheel or two on it. But it was the doctor's car, and you don't go near the doctor's car. And my father used to bring me up and introduce me to Mrs. O'Reilly or whatever when he went in to visit whoever wasn't well. And oh, jeez, they used to pat me on the head. I couldn't stand that, as if I was a puppy dog. And the one thing that got to me was the smell of frying. It was Sunday morning. So everybody was having I was going to say Irish breakfast: bacon, egg, sausage, black pudding, beans, toast, whatever. And that smell stayed with me all my life. And I always hated the smell of frying because of that. And that was my furthest back memory of my father. But he wanted always to be with me, bless him. Always wanted to be with me. So I was in boarding school. I'll never forget it. He was a great gadget man, my father. And he got this thing. It was a mobile phone. Now, we're talking about, what are we talking about? We're talking about 1959. Yeah, around that time. But it wasn't a mobile phone. It was like that thing you had in the army. You wind it up. It's a square box, grey thing with an aerial. And then it has a real phone to hang on to. And my father was always he loved to experiment with things. Okay, so I smuggled it into the school. Now my dormitory was in the top of the house. So you think of a big old mansion. My dormitory was the top of the house, and in the bathroom, there was a skylight. So we arranged to stick the aerial out the skylight. You laugh, but my parents lived about 15 minutes from the boarding school, and anyway he had this, and we were talking. But the thing he didn't know, I must have been 12, I had one Woodbine and a match. I want you to picture this. So I'm on the phone, or this thing, hello. My father's name's Stanley, and he used a code name, Stanbar. He said, hello, this is Stanbar 1, Stanbar Control. Can you hear me? I had earphones on. And I go, Stanbar 1, I can hear you. Smoking away. He didn't know I was smoking, by the way. He would have killed me. And then that was over. And then I came out of the bathroom, and standing there with his arms folded was the headmaster, Mr. Brodie. Now, you got to picture this. The bathroom was full of smoke. I'm holding this war radio in my hand, and he's been listening to this conversation. But he didn't hear my father coming back at me. All he heard was, yes, receiving you loud and clear. Yes, loud and clear. He must have thought I was drunk as well as smoking. And that was the sort of thing that my father liked to do with me. But in boarding school, one of the, you take up different sports and everything. I took up horse riding through my father's insistence. So on a Wednesday, say, you'd go in a jeep, 8 of us, to the stables, and we'd be taught how to ride. But my father decided to buy me a pony. Bess was the name of the pony. Pony was quite mad. Quite mad. The pony would see a fence, and it would take off like a rocket. Now, I mean, take off at a speed that could only be seen. It couldn't be seen with the human eye. The pony would it was a grey, would take off, and as soon as it got to the fence, it would shy to the left or to the right. The only good thing is I went over the fence without the horse, the pony. And my father, oh, geez, imagine how sore that is. My father said, get back on that horse, get back on that horse, get back on that horse. That's all I can remember, saying, get back on the horse. And he'd make me do it again. I suppose it was cruelty, wasn't it? But he adored me. He wanted me to be a good horseman. But because I took up horse riding, he took up horse riding. And now I'm entering my teens. And he would enter me in do you remember the gymkhanas? You do. You do, horse show, gymkhanas. And at that stage, Bess would be brought there in a horse box and saddled up, or I'd have to saddle her. She's like, I had to do in the stable all that poo-poo thing, cleaning all the poo-poo. You think that a teenager would enjoy it, unless he's in love with horses. I wasn't in love with horses. I didn't dislike them, but I didn't want to be a horseman. I think some fathers or mothers used to make the kids take the piano or take the violin and lock them in their room to learn the violin. I was put on a horse. So, I would enter these gymkhanas, and I think it was once, I would always get a white rosette. I think that is feel sorry for you rosette, if you know what I mean. So everybody gets a red for the first prize, second blue, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, whatever. And then you get a white one. That means you turned up, I think. But this one day, I'll never forget it. My father couldn't come to the thing. I can't remember why, to the gymkhana. And I think it was Merrill Montgomery. It doesn't matter what her name was. Or Tottie McDoodle or something. They're all great horse people. I let her ride my horse and got a first prize rosette. And I came home and said, hey, Dad, look, I got a rosette. First prize. And he got so proud. In turn, he put me, that was for showing. It wasn't for jumping, if you know what I mean. Like little Lord Fauntleroy was with a stock and like a bowler hat type thing and your black jacket with the velvet hair. He put me in the Royal Dublin Horse Show, which is world famous. Under 12s or under 14s, I can't remember. And the pony went lame. I think it answered my prayers. But my father you were not allowed to bring a pony that's good. Not lame, but pull muscle, whatever. But my father started injecting the pony, I think, with morphine or something, but the pony was fine. And I did appear at that. That was sort of my last public appearance on a horse, I think it was. But then I decided to take up sailing. By the way, so when I used to go out riding, now I'm, say, let's entering 15 or 16, there's a load of us would go out, kids, boys and girls, if you know what I mean. And we'd gallop over the fields, over the mountain, down the valleys, up, down. And then we'd pull up on our horses, cigarettes, No, there was never any drink. Cigarette. But over the horizon, like a Tonto, would come my father. He'd want to join us. Bless him. He's probably only in his 30s, but he just wanted to be with the crowd. But when you're a teenager, you didn't want your father to be in the crowd, did you? Anyway, I took up sailing, and my father took up sailing. He bought quite a nice yacht, a debutante. I was sailing in Farflies. These are these tiny little boats, yachts, and they would go over. They'd go over, and you had to jump on the keel to upright them. My mother always stood there on the pier saying to my father, he's drowning. And he'd say, it'll make a man of him. It'd be great if he was dead. Anyway, so that's sort of my younger experience of my father. I mean, I adored him, of course I did. But I wanted to be a teenager. I didn't want him hanging around me. He wasn't, and he was one of these people not interested in TV. He'd come in from surgery in the evening, and he'd either be building a model radio-controlled huge bloody plane with his brother, Uncle Neville, or he'd be up in he had like a workroom on CB radios and all sorts of things called in New York and what have you. That was him. Anyway, I left school quite young and went to Germany as a drummer in a band, as you know. I'm not going to go into all that now. But when the band, the Kingbees, were playing in Dublin, my father would turn up, the dark glasses on. These teenagers in a ballroom, 200 teenagers screaming. And there would be my father at the back. And then he'd come bursting into the showroom, into the dressing room, and say, you weren't shaking your head. See, Ringo was the big thing then. You weren't shaking your head enough, Morris. So he was telling me, I'm surprised he didn't take up drumming. So anyway, that went on. And then we got our first TV show. And my father was asked to leave the gallery. So it wasn't our show, by the way. It was called the Showband Show. And we were just one act on the show. But my father went up to where the producers are, when they're doing all the TV sets in front of him and doing all the controls. And my father saying, could you get a camera on my son more? Bless him. And they say, Doctor, could you leave this up to us, please? This is RTE, the national television station, which I ended up suing many years later and beating in court. So my father was very much like all of that, right up to the end. He used to also be very protective of Wendy and the children. I remember I went to Las Vegas once to do. I wasn't doing shows then. It's another story. I went to Las Vegas. Unfortunately, I just sold my house, and it had to be left up to Wendy with the young kids to move and to find a place to rent till I get back and find another house. And my father was absolutely steaming mad at me for leaving Wendy to do all this on her own. And he was probably right now I come to think about it. But that's the sort of man he was. He was always visiting the grandchildren. And I inherited that bit from him as well. I'm always at the grandchildren. Always. Right up to the end. I remember him calling me one day and saying to me, would you like to come with me this afternoon? I'm going to the hospital. Now, at this stage, I'm married with children, etc. And I thought to myself, why does he want me to come to see one of his patients? But I didn't say no. Got into the car with him. And we're driving to St. Vincent's Hospital. And he says to me, I think I have TB. I didn't even know what that was. And I said, well, why didn't you take a pill for it? He said, I'm going to have an X-ray. I've never known my father to be ill one day in his life. Not one day. Never. I never remember him with a cold. I never remember with any illness. Ever. Every Saturday he's out hunting. Sometimes on Wednesday. On the yachts. Always with the horses. He loved animals. When I say hunting, by the way, please don't miscrew that, because he did drag hunting, which they have a drag master. It's a dead animal and the hounds follow the hunt. He had a terrible accident out hunting. He went to hunt. The dream hunt, I think, for most people who go hunting is a hunt called the Galway Blazers. They wear the red and things. That's everybody wants to hunt with them. And he's been invited he was the submaster, whatever you call this, of the South County Dublin Hunt. And he was invited a number of times to hunt with the Galways. But he arrived late with a friend. And this is from what I understand. And it's all stone walls. And anyway, the two of them galloped off in the direction where the hunt had started. And the horse in front of him had kicked out and broke his tibia. Is that what it's called? The bone from your knee down to your ankle. And the bone came protruding through his leg. And he's in the middle of field nowhere. The pain must have been unbelievable. Anyway, that's what happened. And it laid him up. When I say laid him up, nothing could lay Dr. Stanley up. But it did cut out the hunting, etc., for over a year. And but somehow he managed to go to surgery and turn up. And then I opened my first club, Club Elizabeth. And my father was there again. He was there every evening early. Well, that's an exaggeration. But, in reflection, when I look back at it, what a wonderful father he was. He was so supportive of me all the time. Yeah, he did spoil me, bought me sports cars and bought me all sorts of things. He didn't pay for the club, by the way. That's another story. I had to get the money to do the buildings. But I was very young. I was like 19 when I opened Elizabeth's first. But anyway, I got this call from him to say, would I like to come to the hospital? I'm thinking, what the hell does he want me to come to the hospital? And in the car, he told me he thought he had TB. I didn't know what the hell TB was. He said, I'm going to have an X-ray. I waited outside the X-ray room, and he came out, and he was snow white, like he'd seen a ghost. I said, what's wrong with you? He was always a good colour. Oh, great dresser and a good-looking guy. He said, I've got the big C. Pardon? Yeah, I've got cancer. It was somewhere here, but it was unoperable. They couldn't operate. And I went with him to see quite a young doctor, and he said, the truth of the matter is, doctor, you haven't got that long. For a son to hear that. And I know people are listening to this and probably gone through the exact same thing with their mother or their father. It was beyond shocking. Beyond shocking. It was, you couldn't cope with it. Your brain wouldn't function with it. Anyway, my father got chemotherapy. I think it was very rough in those days, the chemotherapy. I remember him being in bed, but he still went to surgery to see his patients all the time. But like on Wednesday or after the chemotherapy, he was in bed for hours being sick from the chemotherapy. So I imagine today's chemotherapy is much more advanced as it was then. Anyway, he then started to go yellow. He then started to lose all his hair. He started to get bent over. He was a very straight, presented man, and here he is. Do you know what he reminded me? He reminded me of Gandhi, Mahatma Gandhi. He was bald and stuff like that. Anyway, the time came for his death. And I was in the hospital with him, with my mother. And he was obviously in terrible pain. He was unconscious. He was terrible pain because you could see on the forehead the lines. And my mother asked for morphine to give to my father. All the people in St. Vincent Hospital, the doctors all knew Dr. Boland. So they know that he knows what he was going through. And I'm not sure what happened. The nurse never gave the morphine injection, but someone did. I can't say who. But I went back into the room and my father, all the lines had gone in his forehead and he looked relaxed. And he started to move his hands like he was in the womb. And slowly they stopped. And this huge breath, and it was all over. And that's the memory of my father. Not that, my memory going right back. And I'm telling this because I'm sure anyone listening to this will probably have memories of their mother and their father. Happy ones. Most of them are all happy. Oh yeah, my father wants to be with me all the time. But what a great thing that really is. You don't see it at the time, but it really was a great thing. So anyway, 2 things to learn here. Don't park your car under a new brick wall. And sure to sit down on the great memories of your mum and your dad. Have a great weekend.